I did the wrong thing. See, screwed it up already. Too many Zoom meetings in a row is what the problem is. Different screens for everything.
Be getting good at it by now.
Yeah, no. I'm trying to get to that point. Jeez. I'm really struggling here. There we go. Wow, technology was a bear there. It's a good thing I can laugh about it.
Absolutely.
All right. All right, bottom of the hour. Are we ready to start up here?
We are.
Ready to go. Okay, so here we are. Welcome to another Think with a Drink. That's the weekly webinar series brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. This week we are doing all about ABLE. Those are 529A as in ABLE accounts. And as we get started here, we do a little housekeeping, a little checklist that we go through. You know, just to let you know, the event is being recorded, but the only thing being recorded is what is being shown on the screen. So you don't have to worry about your camera, your image, or your name being shown because it will not be part of the recording. We do ask, though, that you keep everything muted because we're trying to do this. And there is a chat box. So use the chat box feature if you do have any questions that do come up. I have my co-pilot, who I will introduce in a second, is here to man the chat box, but also make sure that we get this flight in on time as we're going through that. And speaking of your pilots, I am Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. I have been in financial services. I am now in my 23rd year. I'm an investment advisor, which means I act as a fiduciary whenever I am giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I'm going to bring my vice president in. Craig, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I've been in the financial services field a little over 17 years now, and I specialize in doing comprehensive planning for families and small businesses so they can have a better future in relationship with their money.
Tremendous. And like I said, Craig will be chiming in as we go along this evening, but he will also just be filling in. And I feel like I forgot a slide already. How about that? In terms of, so we do want to, just say to everybody, I believe that's the case. This is the disclosure slide. I did. So I will do that. I'm not going to read the disclosures. Instead, I'm going to tell you that the Aries Foundation for Financial Education is a nonprofit. You can visit our website. It's www.ariesfoundation.org. But generally, we try to do these events, these webinars, purely educational. So all we ask is that if you share this or view it and share it, just make sure you're doing it in a purely educational manner. And that was a lot of wording and a lot of talking for me. So we call this Think with a Drink. And the reason we do that is some of this information we know is not the most fun. So we're trying to do it and be in a very relaxed and casual manner as we go through and do the presentations with our audiences. And we can't think of a better way to be relaxed and casual than if you have something cold to sip on, whatever that may be. In my case for this evening, I'm trying to stay in the Oktoberfest mindset. I've been drinking a couple of different variations of that as we've gone on here. And you can see I'm in black and orange. So I've got the whole Halloween thing going on with that. So trying to stay in that very October fall mindset, but I'm drinking Oktoberfest from Sierra Nevada. Craig, what are you drinking this evening?
Well, last week I had Diet Coke. This week I'm back to my Apple Crisp Angry Orchard.
Oh, there you go. No, that's staying in fall mindset, right? That's the apple cider type of thing. That's a
cider beers in the fall. That's where I'm at, right?
Absolutely. So I'm just gonna pour that in. And
maybe next week, maybe woodchuck. Who knows? We'll see.
Oh, there you go. Selling, staying in the fall thing. Skol.
Skol.
Okay, so we're getting into ABLE account. So when we start with ABLE, right? So the first thing is to sort of ABLE came into existence in 2014. It's actually the Achieving Better Life. The real thing is the Stephen Beck Jr. Achieving Better Life Experience. That's the ABLE part of the act. So it went into history in 2014, but the ABLE accounts themselves really didn't come onto the books, the first one, until June of 2016. And here was the thing with the first ABLE accounts, they were very, very limited in their scope. You could only live in the state that had the ABLE account, and there were only like 5 or 6 states that had an ABLE account at that time back in 2016. So pretty much, unless you lived in, I know Virginia was one of the early adopters, unless you lived in Virginia, you just couldn't open an ABLE account even if you wanted to. However, now, because of the legislation, because of the things that have happened, they've opened up the window on that. So now not only do you have the ability, there's 41 different states, including Washington, D.C., that now have ABLE programs in their state, but you don't have to live in the state anymore. So even if your state is not an adopter, even if you're one of the states that does not have the ABLE program, you can go to another state. It acts just like, if some of you are aware of the college fund, the 529, and we're going to talk about those a little later in the program. But those are, you can live in any, it doesn't matter where you live, you can open a 529 from any state. It's just sort of an open book. They realized afterwards that that's what they should have done with ABLE, and that's what they ended up doing. You can see, you know, this is a year ago, a little bit more going into the pandemic there, but there were 33,000 ABLE accounts that had been opened, which is a tremendous number, and over 150 million that's been put and set aside to protect an individual who's either differently abled or has a disability, which is a wonderful thing. And we're going to go through some of the ins and outs of how it works, what do you do, what can you do, type of thing. But from the basis, just understand it doesn't matter where you live. We happen to live in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a wonderful program. It's the Mass Education Financing Authority. Well, that was a lot of words. Otherwise known as MIFA. It's just easier to say MIFA, right?
Yes.
The MIFA has the Attainable program. So if you live in Massachusetts, I suggest you check out Attainable through MIFA as an option for an ABLE account, right? So why the need, right? So, you know, the idea, and what Craig and I talk to families all the time about, is the fact that you have government benefit programs that are available. Forgot to turn off my phone. You have government benefit programs that are available, but they are more of a base, if you will. They are not necessarily going to cover all of the expenses or all of the need that your child, as they grow into adulthood, is going to need to live the life, the best life that they can, right, Craig? That's the idea with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's more than just, you know, do I have a roof over my head and healthcare, but can I do some of the funner things and, you know, enjoy my life as well?
Right.
Not just bare necessities. Right.
Yeah, and so that's really where ABLE sort of came into existence, right? The idea that, well, wait, you know, there should be something set up that allows to have money set aside for some of those, and they're all, we'll kind of talk about them, QDEs, the qualified disability expenses, coming up. But for those other things, other than just basics, like Craig said, you know, the basic needs, there should be money set aside for other things. Right? So this is basically a tax-free account. Now, by that, I mean, you're not going to get a tax break, but any of the money that goes in is not going to be counted. There's not going to be a taxable event on the funds that are being growing inside the account, right? So when the money, it's like a Roth, you put after-tax dollars in, when the money's taken out, it's tax-free when used for the qualified disability expenses of the individual. But one of the things there it tells you is that the diagnoses, the disability had to occur prior to age 26. That's pretty much the only qualifier here with an ABLE account today. There's legislation right in the works as we're speaking, which will hopefully come to fruition sometime by the end of this year, early next year, that's going to push that out to 46. But right now it's 26. And really what that means is you can be older than 26 and open an ABLE account. Your diagnoses just had to be prior to age 26. So it doesn't matter if you're 50, if you were diagnosed at 19, you can open an ABLE account, is the way that works. The whole idea of pushing the number out to 46 is just that there are some, disabilities that occur later in life that you would not be able to open an ABLE account. So it's kind of restrictive on that side. And that's really what the new legislation is intended to do with that, right? So, Go ahead, Craig.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, there's lots of people who, we deal with organizations that deal with people who with their sight issues. And sometimes you get eye generation that happens and you lose sight at older age in 26. So where it's a result of an accident or a fall or some type of thing like that that's beyond your control. So
right. And as you can see on there, it's just a certification that happens. That's what the disability is done and is diagnosed. So just understand it, while it says 26, that's not the age limit. It's just the diagnosis limit. That's one of those, that always comes up sometimes as a question or wait a minute, I'm not understanding that. So just understand that's what that level is about. So who can open it? Well, here's the difference for most of the accounts that we're going to deal with or ever have to go through, is that the individual themselves, your son, your daughter, whoever it may be, is the person who has to open the account. They are the owner. They are the beneficiary. All of it is tied to them. As a parent, as an adult, you cannot open an account like a 529, like a college plan. I can open for my child and fund into it. This has to be opened by the individual. Now, the legislation realized that there are some situations and some where the individual may not have the capacity to do that and may not have the capacity to then manage it going forward. So you can get power of attorney to open the account, power of attorney to then have signature managing of the account on behalf of your child, of your son, daughter, whoever it may be. And I don't know about Attainable because I can't remember the last time I was on their site, so I apologize that before this. But I know a lot of the sites, the websites have the power of attorney, form right there. Like you can just, hey, you're the mom, you're the dad, you're trying to sign up the individual because they lack the capacity. Here's what you need to do. Here's the form, power of attorney. You can open up the account. All right, pretty much, as far as when we do that, simple enough to do, especially for a parent. If you have an attorney, you can assign the attorney to do that. But for a parent, they can do it fairly simple. Comes into a little bit of question in terms of what happens if somebody else wanted to do it, right? And how that works. We got an example of the easiest way to do it. And forgive me for this because I just use this as the example. But the case study is Fred and Wilma, right? So Fred and Wilma, and they have their daughter Pebbles. Okay, so we know Pebbles, but Pebbles in this case has a severe developmental disability, right? So Fred and Wilma want to establish a ABLE account, for Pebbles, which they're able to do since they are Pebbles' parents at the time. Pebbles is the account owner, but because she can't manage the account, they are then designated as power of attorney to handle the oversight, the managing signature, for distributions and for other things on behalf of Pebbles.
So Tom, if you had guardianship, legal guardianship past, adulthood, would you still need power of attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we're going to talk about guardianship in a second. I'm glad you brought that up because that is one of the things with that. But the conversation is because you still have to open the individual still has to open the account.
Right. Okay.
And guardianship is the way that you would able to do that for the adult to then show, here's why I'm doing it.
Okay.
So to sort of drive your point home, so let's say that something terrible happens to Fred and Wilma, that crazy little cart that he runs around on and, goes off the side of one of those or they get eaten by a dinosaur, or whatever happens to them, right? So tragically, Fred and Wilma die, right?
Mhm.
So now Betty and Barney are going to step in to take over and help oversee, the account on behalf of Pebbles. Well, they can't do that without guardianship.
It's actually the other way, right?
Right. So either they're going to do guardianship, take over the responsibility, or as we have talked about in other presentations, become the conservator, right, for the account, because it's a financial, it's legal documents, legal signing. They just can't do it with power of attorney because they're not the parent. So that's where the guardianship thing comes in, right?
Right.
In order to do it, you would have to have guardianship. You'd have to be the person who's overseeing them. Where a parent, you don't have to because you're the parent.
You got everybody in here but Bam Bam.
You know what? I did forget about Bam Bam. See, Bam Bam would be like, so there you go. Now we're going to move that to the next phase of that, right? So what would happen with Bam Bam is Bam Bam would be the contingent, because what's going to happen when Benny and Barney can't do it anymore? They need somebody to take over. So there needs to be that. So one of the things for everybody out there in terms of listening and going through this, that one of the things you need to think about with anything, whether it's trustee, whether it's a conservator, whether it's guardianship, is what's going to happen when you no longer can do it? Who's going to step in and assume that role? And you need to have that in your mindset. You need to have that set up, because otherwise there's nobody, and there's nobody there who can then take over. Right?
So, yeah, that's a bigger issue these days than probably in the past. It's not, like the Waltons anymore. Everybody's living in one big house,
Well, and also because the children are living longer, right?
Absolutely.
Because of medical advances, because of technology, we have blessing, but you have more and more children with disabilities outliving their parents.
Right. Right.
So that it's a conversation that comes up and needs to be addressed with everyone. Right. So key features, it's easy, right? It's an online enrollment. You just got to go online. It's just walk through, just, put your numbers in, put your things in, put your nuts and bolts. So this is who you are, and go through it. The eligible individual, again, you're not required to live in the state where you're getting your able, if that's the case. If you're Massachusetts, like I said, just go through MIFA, you can just do it. But if you want to get the state of Ohio's plan, you can do that, or the state of Virginia's plan, you can do it. It's just, you want to compare them and go through it. The designated beneficiary, again, this is where the little changes, one of the mindset things from a 529 college funding plan, where you may be the owner, your daughter or child is the beneficiary. In this case, no, the owner is the individual and the beneficiary of the account. It's all in their interest, okay? But everything grows tax-free. Like we said, the money goes in, it's after-tax money, comes out, there's no taxes due, there's nothing to it. That says some states have deductions for that, not in Massachusetts, I can tell you that. And if you go to another state and try to, put money in their account, you're not going to get a tax deduction that way. Only works in the case of the state that you live in. And I don't know those states off the top of my head, which ones do that. But I think it's very, very limited. It's maybe like one or two that actually have that.
Now, because this is also, you can't change the beneficiary, it's owned by that person. Is there a clawback provision as well?
Yeah, so the plot, that's when we come into we'll get into that when we go to the cons, the bad, why this is not the greatest thing in the world, right? In terms of going through that.
Okay. But stay tuned for what a clawback provision is.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I in sort of reviewing that and thinking about it in my head, I actually think, because there's what, 41 states we said, I think it's about 13 now that have a deduction. I just know Massachusetts isn't one of them, so that's why I sort of blank on that a lot.
Who gets deduction? The person who is contributing to the account, or just the owner of the account?
The owner of the account.
The owner gets a deduction.
Correct.
So if the parents put money in for them, they don't necessarily get a deduction.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know. Again, I don't know that. You'd have to ask the tax person in terms of dealing with that.
Ask an accountant.
Like I said, because with Massachusetts, it doesn't work here. And I don't know in our area, New England, that there's any state that it actually works. So you're outside sort of our realm and our scope, but you can certainly check it out in terms of dealing with that. You know, so one of the things though, and we did mention this, right? The 529, the college savings plans, right? So that's one of the things in the state of Massachusetts right now. You do have the ability to get a tax deduction for contributing to a 529 college savings plan. With the college savings plan, all right, so in Massachusetts, it's $2,000, right? It's $1,000 per parent per child for that deduction, you know, and it's only a state deduction. It's not a federal deduction, but it's something, right? Here's the thing. Later on, if you realize or decide that the child is not going to go to post-secondary, you know, not going to go to college, the money that has been set aside in that account can now be transferred to a 529A, an ABLE account, with no penalty. There's no cost, there's no fee. You can immediately go from one to the other. So the conversation here in Massachusetts, and not to pump Fidelity's tires any more than I already am, but Fidelity manages both the 529 college savings plan and the attainable plan for the Mass Education Financing Authority. So, you know, open up a 529, get a tax break for the child. Through this year is the last year you can do it, unless they push the legislation and add it. But my understanding is it's supposed to end this year. And then in a couple of years, move it to the attainable, to 529 ABLE, and you've got money that you actually get a tax break on to do it that way. We'll talk about the limitations to that in a couple of minutes, right? But anybody can contribute to an ABLE. So by that, I mean, anybody, you know, parents, grandparents, brother, sister, neighbor, relative, friend, anybody can contribute, right? There's no, it doesn't matter how the money comes in, right? They don't care about that. They're not going to ding you on it. They're not going to count it against anything, right? As far as going through that. However, if the account gets above $100,000, it will disqualify SSI, Supplemental Security Income Benefits. So you got to watch that. You can't go over the $100,000. Once you go over $100,000, you become ineligible for SSI income. Interesting enough, you don't go over the Medicaid limit. And we'll talk about that in a second in terms of the way that works.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Yes.
I thought it'd be all benefits.
Yeah, no. Just it's the SSI number. So, however, you're limited. Right now, it's basically based off the gift tax exclusion. So understand you can only have one account per the individual. The individual cannot have more than one ABLE account. So your daughter opens up an ABLE account. Got an ABLE account. Everybody and their brother wants to contribute to it. You have a large family, you got cousins, you got uncles, you got grandparents, you got all sorts of people who want to throw money at this thing. The maximum that all of those people can contribute together is $15,000 total per year. Can't go above that number, it'll shut you off. Say, sorry, you've maxed it out. Can't get around it and try to open multiple ABLE accounts in different places. They'll catch you with that as well. One ABLE account per individual, max funding per year is $15,000. However, should the individual also have a work program or be out there on their own and working, they can contribute the 12th. It's not, that one says 140, it's actually 12,490 this year that somebody can contribute. So if you think of that and say, well, we, the village, are putting in 15,000. The individual is working, they're going to put in 12,000. You could actually put $27,000 into this account per year.
Oh, so you can get to 100,000 pretty fast.
You can get it to 100,000 pretty fast. So you also then want to make sure that if you get up into the 90,000 range, that there's a spend down going on there. And distributions made for, I talked about that, the qualified disability expenses, otherwise known as QDEs. That's just easier for me to say. QDE, right? Don't count against anything. And generally, it's given like a debit card, right? So you can track the expenses fairly easily, right? So you don't have to worry about falling under anything, because you will not, the money that's in there will not disqualify for any benefits from Medicaid, from Social Security, for housing, for anything. You're not going to get disqualified. All the benefits, so long as the money is used to cover some of those qualified disability expenses. So SSI, right? So this is the whole thing where we're means tested, which is when Craig and I talk to families about means testing. It means that you, basically as an individual, you're allowed to have $2,000 in assets. If you go over $2,000 in assets, you are going to lose Medicaid, you're going to lose SSI. There's all sorts of benefits that you will trip and go over and cause a problem for. However, having the money sitting in your ABLE account is not going to count against any of those benefits. Right? So why ABLE? Because anybody can contribute to it, right? You want to give your child money, or you want to put money aside for your child. We're not talking about a supplemental needs trust here. We're talking about other monies that this gives you the opportunity to do that. Maybe grandma wants to contribute money, or give, some money as a birthday present type of thing. The money can go into the ABLE account because it's not going to count against for anything. ABLE, the money that comes out, not counted as income. No interest is counted. It doesn't matter how much it grows in there. And one of the little hooks there that's on the screen is a trustee can take money, if you have a supplemental needs trust, and move money from the supplemental needs trust into the ABLE account, and the ABLE account can then distribute, and it does not count against it. You may say, why do I need to do that? I've got a supplemental needs trust. Why would I care? Well, there is one place that it does matter, and that's housing. That if you are getting a housing supplement, a subsidy on housing, and you use, and you've got to, offset that with money, and it comes out of the supplemental needs trust, it can actually take away or disqualify the housing benefit. It's just one of those things. It just happens that it can do that. However, if you use an ABLE account to fund that offset for housing, no disqualifying to the subsidy. So you can take money from the supplemental needs trust, put it into the ABLE account, use the ABLE account to pay for the additional housing cost, and no disqualification.
So the usage in an ABLE account is much more liberal.
Well, yes and no, right? So the trustee of actually the other way around, Craig, to be honest with you, a supplemental needs trust, the trustee pretty much can do it for anything because there's no penalties, there's no clawback, there's no provisions on anything, so the trustee could literally, like we talk about, the kid wants transportation, they could buy a Tesla if they wanted to, if they had the money in the account. If the trustee deems that, oh, sure, no, that's what the kid wants, there you go. So as far as that, there is no real holdback there in a third party supplemental needs trust that can do anything, because there's nothing that's holding back any of the rulings on it. In the case of an ABLE, it does have to be a qualified expense.
Okay.
Right? So supplemental needs trust doesn't have that. But I'm just saying, in this particular one area, it's just one of those little tripwires that says, wait, if I use the supplemental needs trust for this, we can actually lose a subsidy that we were getting.
So you just got to know the rules based on each type of account.
Right? Absolutely. That's what it all comes down to, and it's all about it. So as we said, the first 100,000 is disregarded. It's not considered an asset or a resource. If it goes over that, now you're in trouble. So the tripwire is, hey, you get to 95,000, spend something, right? Bring it down, especially if you're having regular contributions go into this thing. Just don't let it go over 100,000, because then you got to go back through the whole thing, right? So it's just one of those, you just got to be wary of it in terms of where it falls. Right? So this just talks about the, what happens and, where is the, so even though the SSI payments, as I had said earlier, and I mentioned that, right? The SSI payments are there, but you still retain the ability to get Medicaid, even though your SSI has been shut off. Just, part of the whole thing with that, but it's more to the point of just don't let it get over $100,000.
Right.
So then, Craig, you asked about the clawback, right? Right. So this is what's known as the Medicaid payback provision. So for those of you who are familiar with, works the same way as a first party trust, in which case that the funds, once the individual, the owner passes, then Medicaid can step in and say, we want to recoup the funds that were paid for benefits for this individual. Now, that does not step in front of final expenses or any outstanding bills that need to get paid as QDEs. So all that stuff gets squared away first. You have burial expense and then qualifying disability expense. Then the state can step in, but the state has to petition for that. So, but they usually go through it and ask for it. So it's one of the things between a first party trust and also an ABLE account, that provision happens. Again, difference with a third party supplemental needs trust, there is no clawback provision. If the individual passes, there's money in the trust, then there are named beneficiaries contingent who get the funds once the individual passes.
So you just want to be sensitive to that if you have additional children.
Correct.
Additional beneficiaries, right?
Right. Okay, so there's a lot of words on the screen here, which I'm going to go through, but it's really just trying to sum up the things in terms of this, right? Which is really that the difference with an ABLE account is, again, it's online. It's pretty much easy to do. You don't have to have a lot of money to open it. You really don't need an attorney to do it. The beneficiary is the individual, so there's no worries about that. People, Nana, Grandpa, anybody can contribute to the thing. The beneficiary really makes the decision unless there's a trustee or power of attorney acting on their behalf about what it's used for. And then the one at the bottom there is, none of that is disqualifying, but that you can take college funding money in 529s and transfer them over, roll them without any taxable benefit.
And that's still limited to 100,000?
Huh?
Is that still limited to 100,000 from the
Thank you for
529?
that. I didn't mention that. No, you can only do it based on the qualified amount. So you can only do 15,000 a year.
So you can't do a dump in.
Cannot do a dump in, can't go over 100,000. So you're limited to 15,000 per year. But if you had 100,000 sitting in the 529, you don't want to dump all of it in because you'll probably go over. So you want to just dump it in as it's being spent, type of thing.
Right, transfer it as it's needed. Yep.
Yes. And so, disadvantages, in today's world, the whole idea of not being brick and mortar sort of works for everybody, right? We're a virtual world, but you can't just go in someplace if you need help. You've got to, contact somebody, and it's all done online. Only the individual can actually open the account. Right now, that disability diagnosis has to have been done prior to age 26. Can't put more than 15,000 in, and you can't have any other ABLE accounts open, only one at a time. And the other one, the biggest caveat there, it is only cash. You cannot put other assets. That's the other thing, Craig, with a supplemental needs trust. You can put all sorts of stuff in a supplemental needs trust. In the case of a 529, it has to be cash. So an asset has to be sold before it can be moved in here.
Right. So like a supplemental needs trust could be property, a home, automobile, any type of asset.
There's a stock, anything, right?
Yep.
All of that stuff can be done. Here it has to be cash. And it all has to be non-qualified, can't be qualified. Again, special needs trust, you could hold retirement account assets inside a supplemental needs trust.
ABLE account can't do that, right?
ABLE account can't do that. It's gonna be after-tax money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is a crazy little roadmap, right? But so, and actually for those out there, if you want to get it, we're happy to send it to you. But it really just talks a little bit about the storyline, the following it through of how the roadmap works, about what is the able and who's eligible and what can I use the funds for? How do I manage my account? How do I enroll? And then, hey, I'm somebody who's actually, I've got more empowerment. I'm out on my own or doing things on that. How can I use this in my daily life and going through it? And that's really what the idea of the roadmap is talking about. So things to consider: how much money is involved, right? So a lot of times with a supplemental needs trust, Craig, one of the things we run into is, the cost, but also the funding. Like a lot of times there's minimum funding for some of those trust accounts that are $25,000 or $50,000 type of thing.
Mhm.
And here it's not. Here it's very minimal money to actually open it. Whose money is it, right? So if it's the individual's money, or is it coming from the village who's trying to fund into that?
Yep.
And then what's happening? Are there benefits, right? If the individual is receiving or going to receive government benefits, then you absolutely want to be protecting it. And then you can see in there is what is the effect of housing expenses paid by an able account versus a special supplemental needs trust. Like I said, that's the one little weird area where an able account. So the idea is, like I said, usually Craig and I will talk to everybody about opening both, right? Having the supplemental needs trust, but having the able there is that sort of sidecar to it to sort of give you a little bit more flexibility with what's going. And maybe it's there just because the individual really likes pizza and wants to have pizza every couple of days, and you can just have the debit card where they can order a pizza and they're all set, whatever the case may be.
Well, the other thing too, Tom, is, disabilities are so varied based on the type of disability, the person who's disabled. And the big thing I see is people, who are disabled are either not employed or underemployed because they're afraid of accumulating assets.
Yeah.
So this gives them an opportunity to actually be in the workforce, get paid, have a semi-normal life, and be able to actually accumulate some assets for themselves without being afraid they're going to be knocked off of their benefits. So, that double-edged sword, right?
Right.
I'd like to work, but I
That is
can't.
that is a big truism, right? That we do run into that a lot with the individuals who are like, well, I didn't think they could, or, we have them working less hours because we're worried about going over the assets or the amount of money that they had or the income they were going to earn. Absolutely.
Or even, they're living at home with parents and they're getting the Social Security benefit, and, that money's got to go somewhere that knocks them off because they can't accumulate the Social Security benefit, right? So there's another place for that money to go.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things we try to help all families with is trying to, have that clear vision of where you want to get to. Like we said, a lot of this comes down to how are you protecting, what are you doing, and how are you maintaining that for the individual, for your son, for your daughter, for whoever it may be. So it's one of the things to be thinking about in terms of going through. One of the things that we make available to everybody is we have this report that we do, which is called a roadmap to government benefits, which just talks a little bit about Medicaid and SSI and SSDI and housing and education and how that all sort of comes together, what the rules are, and just some of the ins and outs of that. So if you ever want to, get that from us, you just type yes in the chat box. We're happy to send that out. As far as an evaluation form, we always look for feedback from anybody in the audience. We always want to know that we're staying on point, that, what we're doing. We do this for a lot of organizations. We do it across the Commonwealth. We do it for organizations that go across the country. We do them for state agencies at this point. So we just like to know that we're staying on point. And Craig, do you have the link available?
Yeah, I'll drop it in the chat box.
Appreciate that. In terms of it, see, there's my co-pilot as we come, you're dropping a landing gear basically right there. Right. So this is us, Craig and I, when we're in our more formal attire out there. That's us with when we're out and about and things that we do. We're always at organizations, at events, trying to help out in the community as much as possible. And we do enjoy this and do try to do outreach. So if you know any organization that could benefit from us, please just reach out and let us know. Think with a drink, what's on tap. We like keeping the theme going there. Next week on the 28th, we are going to do the 6 blunders of a 401k, because you may have gone through a 401k, you may be participating in one, but there are certain things that you need to be thinking about when dealing with participating in a retirement plan. And questions, Greg, any questions in the chat box?
We have no questions in the chat box at this point, so I think we did a good job again.
Perfect. But if you ever do, if you ever need anything from us, you can reach out to the website, www.ariesfoundation.org, or shoot us an email. It's info@ariesfoundation.org, and we're happy to contact you, happy to answer any questions, or give you any feedback. On that note, I'm going to say thanks. Have a wonderful evening, and I'm going to say good night.